big honor to be here. I've actually ran into Carol. She came and visited a few years ago, and I had heard about Purpose Built and heard there was this other place that tried to put all the different elements together to transform a neighborhood, and I was excited to meet her. And she was so sweet. She saw Baker Ripley and said, well, this is more purpose-built than purpose-built. I'm like, well, we're all in this together. So since then, she and I have appeared on a number of panels and round tables together, so much so we can kind of give one another's talk if need be. And I got to be on a panel with Shirley Franklin once in D.C. And when they televised it, which was quite exciting for all 15 people in the country that were watching it, underneath, when I talked, underneath me they put Shirley Franklin, former mayor of Atlanta. And so it was a promotion for me, but I was thinking, how could they confuse us, because I'm a lot taller than she is. And so it was just, but at least today I was introduced by somebody who actually knows me. And it's her fault this talk is titled Snowball's Chance in Hell. I have to say, before I said a snowball's chance in hell, I said other smart stuff. But this is what it's like. It's like when you get interviewed by the media, and you say really smart stuff, and then they just put one thing and not the one you wanted. Wait, I got to get this little clicker thing here because this thing doesn't move on its own. So we got. Look, the organization that I lead is over 100 years old, and and I feel real proud of the work that the team that's there now is done, but a lot of people for a long time worked really hard to keep Houston a place of opportunity for everyone. And Baker Ripley was really a dream, and it was born of the aspirations of the community. And the name of this talk came from the guy down at City Hall that when he saw the plans said, well, that has a snowball's chance in hell of ever being built. And, real encouraging stuff like that. You guys are all working on something that someone thinks has a snowball's chance in hell of ever being built. Or in our case, a snowball's chance in Houston, which ain't too good either. So what happened here was it did get built because of the generosity of Houston and because of a fundamental, I think, spirit in the city that says, when people come here and work hard, they ought to have a shot. And I always say I like to raise money in Houston because if you're raising money in Houston, chances are you're raising it from somebody that's been broke a couple of times. That's a real big difference because they know broke in the moral condition. But we were raising this money, I have to tell you, part of it was in 2008 and 2009. That wasn't a real good fundraising year. So I just want to, and I'd say good chance for me to acknowledge a former teammate who's here, Imelda Douglas. She's the Chief Development Officer, and I learned a lot from Imelda. One of the things I learned is the value of having phase 1 of the campaign and phase 2. Yeah, because phase 1 was when things were going okay, and phase 2 was when it was in the ditch and we had to pull it out. So this was grand opening day, and I want to tell you that we've published now this impact report that has all the numbers you ever wanted to know. And I think numbers are really, really important. There is one part of my brain that preoccupies itself constantly with that, but most of my brain is consumed with making sure that we are everywhere there is a spark of the human spirit still alive and well, and that we're doing everything to fan that flame and help people grow into who they're meant to be. So if you want to have the impact report and you want to hear about the dollar return on everything we're doing there, from the tax centers to the credit union and the school and the new businesses that we've helped start, all of that, please email me, I'll send it to you. But today I just want to talk to you about what happens when you succeed. A lot of people wrote about us, and then it was really good, because it's sometimes when you're real busy working on things, you don't have time to write your story, and smart people at Brookings and Urban Institute and Federal Reserve thank you very much for telling our story. We really appreciate it. But here's the 4 things they all talked about. Oh, I'm going to tell you one more thing. And then I got invited to the White House and to meet with the President of the United States. And yeah, it was a small room, and there were a few of us there. And just like I did before this talk, I always say a prayer, I do a good job. And my mom, she texted me and said, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, I am terrified, So I'm going to let my team down. I'm meeting with the president once in a lifetime. Got to get it right. So I wrote her back and I said, "Yes, I'm praying really hard to God. I really do a good job." And this is my mother's response. "God got you to the White House. I think you could do the rest yourself." That's my mom. So, yeah. So this is really about what the rest of the work is. After you've got all the passion and the praying and here's in the human spirit and everything, there's some work involved, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that. These are the 4 things we got recognized for. It's being large. We've built some scale. It's a $260 million organization, 7,000 volunteers, 1,200 employees, 70 locations, because, we really mean this. And at the same time, when you go into a neighborhood, it's about being small because they don't really care about all that. And the way you go in is really, really important. The leveraging of public and private funds, enormously important. If you look at our budget, you see a whole lot of government money. Now, I guess it ain't any secret that in Texas, we have a little ambivalence about government money. So when y'all see our governor, I would like you to explain this to our governor. It is our money. Right? It's not the government's money, it's our money. We sent the money to the government, and now we want to get the money back. It's not that hard. So you cannot have any of these issues about government money. It's your money. Go get it. Get all you can. And here's the other thing. It's going to come in a contract, and it's not going to work real well, and it's going to be all fraught with all these requirements and stuff. That's what technology's for. Just do it. If they want their report every Friday, blue ink on toilet paper, send it to them. Just do it. Get the money, and then use the private funds to leverage it and make it work in your community. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And be holistic. That was the biggest thing. Neighborhood Centers was founded out of a settlement house movement. We understood that it was the whole neighborhood, that all of us who've tried to transform a neighborhood on the back of one element or another, we've seen the limitations of that. Okay, I gotta just say one other thing. So I'm Cajun, we detour a lot. You just have to be all right with that. Okay, so have you ever noticed how if you came at community development from a housing standpoint, then you think everything else is wraparound, right? And then if you came at community development as an educator, you think everything else is a wraparound. So wherever you started, everything else is a wraparound. Well, Neighborhood Centers is just a great big wraparound. And because, really, people need jobs and they need a place to bank. And a school that makes kids like Doug a possibility. We all want to live in that kind of community. So wade into the complexity of working with all of those elements and do what it takes to put them together. So, and then the 4th thing is hugely important to me. So I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and my parents accomplished this feat of having 8 kids before they were 30. They got married at 17 in June, and they had me at 18 in June the next year, my sister June the following year, not quite a whole year. And then that's how you have 8 kids before you're 30. Catholic, no rhythm. And so it's right. Okay, wait. Okay, one more detour. Okay, so we have talked about gentrification, poverty, race. Probably some of y'all talked about class too. And I'll probably talk about immigration. That just leaves sex and money. I'm not doing sex. So, but I felt, growing up in this family, I want to tell you, we were the family that everybody shook their heads at. I just remember going through the grocery store and having people go, that can't turn out well. And that doesn't do much for you. So we really, 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 really believe in building on strengths. So those are the 4 elements that got us there. This is a model that I'd love to share, and we've done some tapes and materials on this that we give out. And it's really about building an organization that has scale and depth, but it's about putting together infrastructure in a way that allows you to grow and do big projects, because the challenges that we're facing aren't one-off things. You're not going to change the neighborhood, transform a community in a couple of years with a couple $100,000. This is going to be substantive work that has to be accomplished over time. So you want to build infrastructure that really supports that work. So you can be accountable, so you can be innovative, so that you can drive toward not just outcomes but results, transformational results, the meaningful things that change the way people live. And this is really kind of a diagram of how we use money at neighborhood centers, and the importance of taking the more flexible funds that you get, pushing them toward the edge and allowing them to do the innovative experimental work. If we spend everything on the core of what we do, we have nothing to try new things with. So this is really kind of a financing perspective and strategy that we use that allows us to constantly evolve, to be 100 years old but still evolving every year and every cycle in response to the new challenges that face our region. So that's a little bit of the how. And Carol said I should talk a little bit about the lessons and the why. So this is for all of you starting out. No one's coming, and that's the good news. Because it is, really. Because if you've been hung up and stuck and you're waiting for the big check writer or the major policy change or the right leader, that's not how it works. It's really about looking at your community and saying whatever is most profoundly troubling to you, whatever you get up and go to bed thinking about, you're it. What gets led gets done. I was talking to this wonderful young woman who was telling me, she works for Purpose Built, and she stopped me and she was telling me a little bit about what she accomplished as a teacher and then why she wanted to be at Purpose Built. And she said, it hurt so bad because I was a great teacher, and when I left, it wasn't as good as when I was there. Yeah, that's right. Because if you don't do it, it doesn't happen. That's it. What gets led gets done. You are it. And the only thing that takes me away from the work I'm doing right now is to come and talk to people who want to do the work. And you want to do the work. So I'm so glad to be here. Huge honor. But it's up to you. And you got to be committed, no matter how hard it gets. And it's do what you can with what you have where you are right now. Now, the person that said this to me several times over was a person I was working with in Detroit. That's a rough area to get this work done. And I like the right now, because we are charged to go out into the community looking for the strengths and resources and assets that already exist. And just to be clear, people are the first resource. They're the first asset, the people that live there. And so tread lightly, right? You're on someone else's territory. You're in someone else's living room. Tread lightly, but it's do what you can with what you have where you are. Waiting doesn't do any good. Great if you want to work on policy, and if everyone gets, it's possible that Congress could actually take action on something. Remember when we used to say, it's not like it's going to take an act of Congress? like in the days when Congress acted? Okay, well, I don't know what we say now. But anyway, it's not about when. It's just right now. What you have, it's assembling the resources in a way that works. And you can't build on broken. So people are the first resource. So if you're in this business right now because you've looked at a neighborhood and you say that neighborhood is a real big problem and we're just sick of the problem, that's not your starting place. Your starting place is really to wade in, to understand, to tread lightly, to go as a trusted guide and visitor, not as a savior and not as a fixer. Sometimes when people ask for help, we don't help, we colonize. Not the same thing. And people are, every community, and no person ever gave birth to a child, held the child in their arms, and didn't imagine a life for that child better than the one they were born to. Everybody has those hopes and dreams and aspirations. And, drawing that out, understanding what those are, building on that. Now, that sounded, so I just want to tell you, some people don't speak Southern in this country. So when I wrote that in that fabulous What Works book, they asked me to write something, so I did. Your pal David, I wrote it. And they sent it off to a copywriter, and the copywriter changed that to, "One cannot build on that which is broken." I don't know what the hell that means. So I said, look, y'all can change all those other things, but the people I work with, we understand this. But I think the real thing here is just to really care about what people long for, the deep longings that people have to show up in the world in a meaningful way, to put their gifts to work, to find the biggest question people have in these neighborhoods: is there a place for me here in this world? Will I be able to contribute and get something done? And will my children have a better life? So when we tap into those deeply held aspirations, when we build on that, that's the very definition of sustainability. That's the real sustainability, because you're building on what people long for most. So listen twice, build once. There's and I've gotten a chance to spend a lot of time in Australia, and Aboriginal culture is really important. Listening, the deep listening that says, "I embrace you, your humanity, we're all in this together." So we have to listen in that kind of way, with a deep honoring of the human spirit of the people that we meet to help. And so, because sometimes they ask for things, and what we hear, when have great stories of this total, which I don't have time to share with you, although they're very funny, and later on tonight. But the way we can misunderstand the questions that longings and the questions that people have for help. So we have to ask questions and really pay attention to the answers. We say the change begins with the first new question, and that's the question that's not about what's wrong with this community. It's about what's right with it. What makes this a place to live? Who are you most closely connected to here? What matters most to all of you? And what have you gotten done on your own? So I got the news week before last that this community, this next neighborhood we're going into at their invitation, this community organized to tax itself in a way that allowed them to purchase land, and they're now donating that land to us for this next project. It came out of the community. And if we had just waited in there with our own ideas, we'd have missed that whole opportunity. And this now means this is a much more powerful partnership than it would have been otherwise. Listen twice, build once. And finally, really, this is my favorite. You need a big why. And you need it for two reasons. You need a big why because this can't be an us and them story. The days of us and them just lead us down a path where we can make up stories about people and tell ourselves that somehow they're not wired like we are, that they're different. And that gets us nowhere. So the big why has to be so all-encompassing. You have to know your own why. Why are you in this work? What is it you're trying to do? My why is deeply embedded in my family, and that feeling that I had as a child as I sat in Beaumont, Texas on absolutely the wrong side of the railroad tracks, watching across the way from the refinery, that smelled real good, and watched those trains go back and forth and thought, can I get out of here? Beaumont, I have to tell you, I usually make fun of Dallas, but I met some real nice people from Dallas last night. So I can't make fun of Dallas. But anyway, I think that there is a longing in every human being. I mean, we can do things to snuff it out, but there's two things that we hunger for. One is realized potential. We are hungry to matter, to show up in the world, to deliver something, to give something, to be able to do something with our talents. And the other hunger is for belonging. So when you go out to talk about your project, there can be no us and them. It has to be all of us in this together. You need a big we, right? All right. And when you've done a great job, people will invite you places, and then they will tell you all the things that aren't right about what you did. And they'll tell you and they'll ask you, well, especially if they're from New York. And I'm not making this up. I'm not even exaggerating. This is true. People from New York, because they know everything there, they are sure of that. And they will say things to you like, well, the trouble with projects like yours is that, the private sector will never fund that. And I'm like, well, the private sector kind of built this thing. Oh, well, but the trouble with that is it's just not sustainable. I'm like, well, we've been around 100-something years, and, we've grown every year for 27 years. That kind of looks kind of like sustainable. And then they'll say, well, but it's not replicable. And to which I say, you're damn right. Because, community development ain't a cut and paste job. It's not a cut and paste job. People say, well, you've built a model for the country. Nope. These principles, the listening, the building on strengths, honoring what's there, all that, replicate that. There's no need to stamp out a Baker Ripley. Baker Ripley was born of the aspirations of the people in that community. Make sure you know what they are in your community, build on it. So anyway, after they finish telling you all the ways it won't work, they go back and write some more, papers. And then you go back and do a couple more neighborhoods, So that's the way that works, You just thank them, I think so I got to tell you another story about my mama. She's a typical Southern woman. She does not leave the house without being, fixed up. And so she visited a Midwestern state to see my sister. And when she got there, she felt like perhaps the women there didn't quite do as much as they could with themselves. And so when she came back, I said, Mom, what'd you think about, I'm not going to say the state. And she said, well, I don't know what's wrong with those women. They just all look like they were stood out in the field and left there. So that's my mama. And so you can't go around doing this work looking like you were stood out in the field and left there just because somebody didn't compliment you or write you a check or, didn't make you feel good about what a great job you did. You're going to get all kinds of feedback. And the one thing you have to know is you got to do good work because you do good work. You're going to do great work on some project and you have gotten some funding for it, and you'll think with all this great work we did and this fabulous result, that's going to keep flowing, and they're going to say, nah, we're over that. About the minute you get, that's the only thing in the world you do where you do it really right and they change the definition of what really right is. You've been there, you know that. But if you know your why and you do good work because you do good work, you can sustain yourself. Because I'll tell you what, none of these folks ever came up to me saying, well, it's not replicable, or it's not sustainable, or, the private sector won't fund it. They just said, thank you, right? So, thank you. Oh, embarrassing. Yeah, oh my God. Embarrassing.
That was beautiful.
Oh my God, it's over.
That was really good. So Angela will take some questions for a few minutes.
This is my favorite part. It's over. Like my hands are like can stop shaking, and so yeah. Y'all are just stunned, right?
Can you talk a little bit about immigration?
Yes. So Houston's become the nation's most diverse city, and I really believe I truly can tell you this in all honesty. The vast majority of leaders in Houston in every sector have embraced this as one of the good news stories of all time, because it's making our city a very vibrant place. And as you know, enviably, I think Houston's unemployment is very low. We need everybody. We need everybody. We desperately need immigration reform. And I think but you know, while we were trying to raise this money in 2008 and 2009, there was this real ugly conversation about immigration. And, you know, you got to talk about stuff like this. So people didn't want to say anything about serving undocumented immigrants, but that didn't make sense because, you know, you got to tell the truth. So yes, we serve undocumented immigrants, so do you, and we're all served by them because you can't hire 12 million people. And I think there you go, right? That's the facts. And you know, of course, I really like the sign that says, "You don't like immigrants, and when are you leaving?" So, yeah. But I mean, really, though, you know, I can be all flip about it. But honestly, what's true is folks say a lot of things they don't mean because they're scared. And then when you get down to it, they write you a check. As my board member says, they write us checks for things they won't vote for. And what happened in Houston was there was such an understanding in our hearts. We knew that the people who had come there came for the same reasons we did, for an opportunity. They thought, this is a place, if I work hard, I have a different future. So I think this story, Secretary Baker Ripley comes from former Secretary of State James Baker's family. His grandmother founded the agency over 100 years ago. She felt like every resident of the city ought to have an opportunity for education, for a decent job, for health services. Secretary Baker says he loves, y'all don't tell him I said it. I don't know, I didn't get permission to quote him, but I'm just going to do it. But he said he loves watching people discover Houston through the lens of Baker Ripley, because it's really a place that celebrates the fact that people from all over the world still trust us. They still trust this country with their dreams and their hopes and their desire for freedom. And they still believe that this magic combination of capitalism and democracy, that's the most fertile ground for those dreams to grow. They still believe that. And so when you're face to face with that, I don't care who you are, or what you heard on the TV station last night, you really want to support it. So I don't know what you wanted me to say about immigration. Look, I pray for immigration reform, but in the meantime, you know, we got to, you know, do what you can with what you have where you are right now. So,
Angela, you talked about leaving room for funding where you're pushing the envelope and trying new things. Would you care to give us a few examples of new things?
So I want to pick a simple, I'll tell you one thing that's coming up. We're just launching now a mobile community center. You know, Houston's all spread out and not very dense, so you can't build a community center in every neighborhood. So we're fortunate now, over many years, we built up some of our own money. People talk about building a budget, but you really got to build a balance sheet. So we have a little bit of our own money, and we've got a mobile community center. And so it's called Good to Go. I love that. And so it can roll in and out of places that can't afford a community center, but we can put the credit union, immigration services, ESL class, we can put a lot of things on that mobile community center. And we do that with the flexible funds, right? Because we don't really know how it's going to work out. But a real simple example I use a lot to explain kind of funding evolution is there's a core of our senior services, it's a meals program, right? And it's not even a very good meal, you know, it's kind of like a little crummy meal. But then we've got some extra money from United Way. United Way wants it spent on these sites, these congregate sites where our seniors can come together and be together, and they pay for that. Then we sought some funding for an evidence-based exercise program. We received that. And then we've gotten some money more recently for an expansion of that and into something else that's an intergenerational experience for seniors. Here's the point. You know, we could say no to the money that's just about a meal, because the goal for seniors is aging in place. Older people are the best resource in neighborhoods. They have the history, They care. They know what matters. They have a sense of time and perspective. So aging in place is the ideal. So we don't want them in institutions, right? We could turn down the meal program because say, well, that'll never get us there. But you take that and you begin layering around it those things that will do the rest. That way you're building and leveraging each time off of what you're already doing. And then the money that is, most nonprofits will take every new nickel they get and spend it on what they're already doing. You have to take some of those new nickels and spend them on some experiments. Because really, if you're not willing to try something new with dollars you already control, then why would you ask someone else to do that? So a part of every budgeting, right, yeah, thank you. She obviously, she probably does finance, yeah. Those people get it. But I mean, really, we go to people and say, well, we really, nonprofits who won't do anything new until somebody writes them a check, that's really not going to work out well, because you're right there and you know what needs to be done. You need every year a little bit of money to do something, to push the envelope, to experiment in some way, to figure out the next thing. And you can't do that with heavily restricted federal funds, but you can do that with other contributions, and you have an obligation to try. I think they're, yeah, okay. Thank y'all.